Hi everyone, it's Mariel Gardner here again with Accepting Therapy Interviews. And today we have Valerie Hughes, one of my favorite people here at the practice, and we're going to talk about self-care and what that looks like, especially in relationships and in different parts of your life, and kind of breaking down what we mean by self-care in general, because that can look like a lot of things. So, hi Valerie, how are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me, Marielle.
Of course. Well, where do you want to start? Impart us with your wisdom.
Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to ask for your needs to be met. I think a lot of people tend to think about self-care in the form of drinking enough water and exercising and making sure you have time for yourself and those kinds of things. But they don't really think about what happens before you do those things, which is like thinking about and asking for your needs to be met. So I chose this because it's something that has it's always hard. I mean, I have a hard time sometimes immediately asking for a need to be met, and I don't think that it's well laid out for many people. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about how to ask for a need to be met. Should I get going?
Yeah, jump right in.
Cool. So I'm gonna give some examples of how to first identify that there is a need that's not being met. Typically, when I think about when needs aren't being met for me, there's a few things that tend to be happening. First, I find myself procrastinating. Like I will just do anything other than a specific task that I have, or have a specific conversation or see a specific person, I will avoid. And so, yeah, I'll push it back, push it off. That's usually a good starting point for me to check in and see if there is a need of mine that maybe isn't being met. Another way I know a need is not being met is if I'm thinking a lot about how frustrated or resentful I have become towards a person, a task, a job, an activity. It usually, to me, suggests that either I am overloaded or I am not really into doing the thing. Or I don't feel safe to ask, which is another issue, of course. And then the last thing I always tend to look out for, or the last thing I do after I've kind of identified that one of these feelings is coming up for me, I sort of sit myself down and I think a little bit about why. And usually I'll write out a few bullet points because I am that kind of person.
Sure.
Some people tend to do like a full journal entry or a narrative, or some people are really great about like recording themselves, just talking it through and then playing the recording back. I think there's a lot of ways to organize this frustration so that you're able to like clearly see what you might need. So an example, I had been working in a job for a while and had taken on a lot more responsibilities and had not been getting reimbursed. It was not this job, but it was a job I've had in the past. And I remember feeling increasingly more frustrated, increasingly more exhausted about going into work, and increasingly just resentful of the people I was working with, my boss, which I think if you've listened to any of these by Sarah Silva, like typically leans towards burnout. I was definitely feeling some burnout.
Yeah.
And so I had to sit myself down and write out some of the things I would need to continue at that job because I was feeling crappy. And so I wrote it out and I realized that in order to continue, I felt like I needed to be adequately compensated for the work I was doing, which was more than the work that I had been hired on to do. And it had been a sustainable period of time. It was not something that ebbed and flowed. So I sat down with my boss and I was just like, hey, I'm realizing that I'm actually taking on a lot more work. And I would understand if this is something that is like temporary, but it's been ongoing for a while, and I need to be compensated differently in
Sure.
order to continue this job. So I think one of the things to note is that I acknowledged that I had been feeling like I was taking on a lot more. And I think the first thing you do when you ask for a need to be met is you want to acknowledge some feeling. And I know saying I've been taking on a lot more is not necessarily a feeling, but I think another way I could phrase that is I am feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling a lot of pressure. I'm feeling frustrated by the amount of work that I am getting. So the second thing is you want to be specific about the situation, which is when I said the amount of work that I have been taking on. And so in being specific, you're just being clear that um, it's not related to the actual work itself, it's the volume in that situation. I loved the work itself. I just was getting a lot of it. Sometimes it might actually be the work itself, in which case that would be a different phrasing. And then the last thing, right, is you ask for your need to be met. You express your need. So in that situation, I said I would like to get X amount of dollars. I need a little bit more money in order to continue.
Sure.
And so the purpose of having a little bit more money, right, is like we very rarely acknowledge the impact of capitalism on our lives, but having a little bit more money does create a little bit more security and safety in our lives, which I think then sort of transforms into a slightly more regulated nervous system for some people, especially when you're having a hard time paying your bills and you're working all the time, which I was at the time. So I think that those are three, like that particular formula: express the feeling, be clear about when it's happening, and then ask for the need to be met. That is kind of the formula for success in asking for needs to be met.
Yeah.
In relationships, that for me typically, oh, Marielle, did you have a question?
No, I'm taking notes and following along. This is very helpful so far.
Okay. Um, so in relationships, right? One of the needs that I think is important, I think it typically feels a little bit more vulnerable to have a need met. But if you're finding yourself feeling particularly anxious with a partner, or you are feeling frustrated or resentful, or even just like generally kind of annoyed by them, or on the other hand, you're finding yourself spending like too much time with that partner, or you are like filling time that you would normally fill for yourself with that partner. I mean, ultimately some of it is balance, right? But we got to fill our needs first. And if you find yourself sort of slipping on self-care, or you are just like tired all the time in your relationship, those usually tends to be good indicators that you need to check in about a need that maybe isn't being met. Relationships, expressing needs are like, it's definitely a little intimidating when you're first starting out. And I think that it's important to know that like you are entitled to ask for those needs. Are they going to be met in the way you want them to? Maybe not, but that's a different conversation. So the way you ask for a need to be met in a relationship, following the express the feeling, be specific, and ask for the need to be met formula would look something like this. You might say to a partner, hey, I have noticed we've been spending a lot of time together lately, which would be flipping, be specific, and the feeling. And I'm feeling a little drained. Would it be possible if this next week we just spent 2 days together instead of 4? I need a little time to recharge.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of how you go about expressing that need and setting that boundary. You're also teaching them a little bit more about you as a person.
Sure.
So they are getting the opportunity to learn that you like to be by yourself when you recharge, which can lead to lots of really lovely things, right? I think my partner knowing that sometimes I like to watch Bob's Burgers and eat junk food, and that's how I recharge, has led to that partner being a little bit more likely to, if we're spending a lot of time together, one of those days we're gonna like watch a movie. It doesn't have to be like, let's go out all the time. Let's have these deep conversations all the time. So even then, we're having quality time together, but it's me leaning a little bit more towards something that recharges me.
Sure.
It also has led to us being a little bit more thoughtful about how we spend time together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's important for partners to know these things, and it's also important for partners to like it teaches partners how to interact with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, those are the two that I think come up most often. Is
Mhm.
how do you expect or express needs to be met in your workplace, and how do you expect or express needs that aren't being met in relationships?
Yeah.
And yeah, you follow a 3-step plan of express your feelings, be specific, and ask for the need to be met, and you should be good to go.
Awesome. I love this. It comes up for my clients all the time too, and even myself, right? Like I think no matter who you are, these are things that are important to learn. And even just getting in touch with your needs and then getting more comfy communicating that to someone else. I think that's the challenge for a lot of people, but giving insights to your partner, being happier at work. And this also makes me think a lot about boundaries, and that's a whole other conversation, but you are allowed to have needs in a relationship. And the hope is that you express them and your partner can meet you there, or you can find some sort of compromise or work through that together. But you're allowed to have needs. And I think that's such a hard thing for some people to admit or accept too. So
Mhm.
I love this conversation. I think it really, simplifies what can be really scary for some people.
Yeah, and it will probably feel a little uncomfy and a little rigid at first. And I think it's important to practice. Like,
Mhm.
similarly, I'm one of those people that feels uncomfortable receiving compliments, but it's something that I force myself to sit with now because it's like people are genuinely complimenting me,
Yeah.
and I want to be better at receiving compliments. So, the feeling of discomfort you're having when you start setting boundaries and asking for your needs to be met a little bit more clearly and directly is not related to something being wrong. And I think that that's really the important thing to sort of sit with, is that you are absolutely allowed to ask for a need to be met, but you might feel uncomfortable doing it at first. It's a practice thing. I think
Yeah.
we assume that we are going to just be like automatically great at these things. And if we haven't been doing them, we probably aren't. Um,
Yeah.
it's considering yourself a beginner and asking for your needs to be met,
Mhm.
and just
Absolutely.
letting yourself feel a little of that beginner's discomfort.
Yeah. And just like with setting boundaries, which we can talk about in another video maybe, but remembering that in doing this practice, it's to strengthen your relationship or make you happier at your job or just to make things easier. Although it feels hard and scary, it is to improve things at the end of the day. So yeah, this is super helpful, Val, and thank you so much for imparting your wisdom. I don't know
Welcome.
if that's the appropriate thing to say, but it feels that way.
Yeah,
All
cool.
righty. Well, I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria.
Bye.